How are Canadians saving for retirement? Welcome to Tea at Taxevity, where you get insights from insiders, our many clients and friends. I'm Pramod Sharma, the actuary at Taxevity. I help people who care about sustainable financial independence harness the power of life and health insurance. Our guest is Trevor Parry. Trevor, what do you do when you're not being interviewed?
I change an inordinate amount of diapers, having 2 infants at home, but when I'm not doing that, or leafing through doorstop-sized tax books, I'm the president of Parry McCone, which is a strategic planning firm based in downtown Toronto, serving incorporated professionals and entrepreneurs and family businesses right across the country.
Are people saving enough for retirement these days?
I would argue no. I haven't seen statistics of late, but I remember in my crossing the country days always referencing the CFIB and their reports where they talked about how few Canadians are actually using their RRSPs. I think it's indicative of a lower than healthy savings rate. I think a lot of that is cultural, and a lot of that is economically driven through what I believe to be excessive tax levels and growing tax levels in the country. I've always been an admirer of Edmund Burke, and of late have been reading Confucius, and we look to sort of the philosophers of great cultures as to why people do things. And both of those spoke about looking backwards and having duty to those who have been before us and those who are yet to come. So when we look at why Britain was able to do what it did and what China is doing, a healthy savings rate because of an understanding and a duty to those who have been and those who are yet to come, I think is a cornerstone of that. And we in Canada, I think, have missed that. I've always said we need to get back to the World War II mentality, the war bonds kind of thing, where people believed in a larger purpose. It's become extremely difficult. The top tax rate in this province in Ontario is 49.5% now, and God forbid it goes to 53.5% that a certain politician has recommended. But we will of course fight that diligently. But I would say that no, they're not saving enough. They're spending. Certainly, look at the rebound in the automotive industry, or people buying barbecues and things like that. It's still a consumer society. Now, we're healthier than the Americans, but we're not where we should be. We need to be creating capital, and that's done through savings, whether that is inside of our companies or in RRSPs or in pension plans. We have to rediscover that.
How are people who are saving?
Well, there's sort of a great fissure as to how you do that. For those who can incorporate, which is the marketplace in which I largely deal. The corporation or a corporate structure is, I think, the default position. It has to start there. The reason that doctors have incorporated is, of course, for income splitting, but to hopefully facilitate larger savings. The use of holding companies or beneficiary companies through family trusts and things like that are critical in the first steps to savings. But there are other savings vehicles, and I think a lot of it has to do with how you're taking your remuneration. But that said, if we just simply look at things like RRSPs, Canadians don't compare them to what is available in our principal trading partners. Talk to some of our American friends. The IRA allows for a fraction of the contribution that an RRSP does. It's a fantastic structure that people really need to embrace, and the TFSA is a godsend. I think it's the first real wonderful piece of policy that is directed towards improving that somewhat anemic savings rate that we have in this country. So those things have to be considered. Now again, it's going to go to remuneration, and I know in the last several years, I was always involved in the debate as to how should I pay myself. Well, how you pay yourself is how you're going to retire. And there is no right way. Certainly there have been those vociferously arguing that they should eschew salary and embrace an all-dividend model. And there are certain merits to that. It's less so now because governments, lugubriously slow as they are, have realized that there were what we'll call integration gaps forming in provinces. They still exist. They're nowhere near what they were. I think Nova Scotia has the most glaring one, but Ontario, there's a slight one. But so many accountants were advocating to their clients, take no salary. You're only going to take dividends. We're going to save you 2 or 3 or 4%. You're not going to pay CPP. But I think it's a myopic answer. They, for the most part, never thought about long-term savings. And that goes to an objective understanding of how you are as an investor, how you are as a saver, how you are as a business person. So how they are saving is how they're being paid.
Okay.
Yeah.
How popular are IPPs these days? And first of all, what is an IPP?
Sure. IPPs, individual pension plans, or designated plans, although in 2011 they actually created a designation in the Act called individual pension plan. I don't know if they're in a small, I think something of a rebound right now. Certainly in the latter part of the last decade, we were doing quite a few. I was directly or indirectly involved in setting up about 2,000 of them. There's only about 12,000 in the country, I think. And certainly when the all-dividend remuneration argument started to take hold, we saw a pretty fundamental slowdown in those embracing IPPs. Now, I have done, reams of tax analysis as to what works, and I've come back to the idea that it's an objective approach. If the individual can save, then maybe all dividends and using the corporation and not using anything else to save can work. They have to understand risk, they have to understand litigation risk and all these issues. But if the individual can't save, then perhaps putting on a set of very nice handcuffs work. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing about a pension, and if you talk to anybody who's lucky enough to be in a defined benefit pension plan that unfortunately you and I and all the taxpayers are paying for, they probably live longer. They have a lot less stress associated mm-hmm. with how am I going to fund my retirement. Business owners need to understand that. They need to understand their financial landscape in an objective fashion. Moshe Milevsky talks about risk to the entrepreneur, and I really believe in what he says in the sense that if you're an entrepreneur, your world is risk. If you're a civil servant, you really have no risk. So with the profits that you make, obviously you're going to reinvest those in your company because you understand that. Why should you be taking a risk with those profits, with your savings? And so I'm very much an adherent of a risk-first financial plan, and that's something that we try to do through a very objective and process-driven process. So if the individual comes to the conclusion, and it's got to be beyond simple anecdotal evidence, that they are a good saver, they are hardwired to save, then perhaps the corporate alone strategy can work because they're hardwired to actually go out and undertake a project. They're detail-oriented and they're going to succeed. If they're not, like so many doctors that we've seen who've incorporated who think that they're going to manufacture savings by being incorporated and in fact put themselves in a worse spending situation, well then perhaps they look for a psychological reason of putting on the warm blanket of a pension, and an IPP I think transcends tax analysis at that point and makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. What about the personal pension plan?
I've seen a few of them. It's an interesting idea. It's basically a hybrid plan where you can utilize the benefits of both defined contribution and defined benefit. And I think the advantage is really twofold. One, you can ameliorate issues associated with deficiencies in your plan. As we know with defined benefits, you need to fund to a benefit level, and if you can't, certainly provincial governments take a less than a rosy look at that. So you have the ability to manipulate and mitigate that issue. And I think the defined contribution factor allows those who are considered to be too young for a traditional IPP to look at it. So, all the lawyers who are doing really, really well at age 35, if there are any, may look at this as a means of savings. And again, they have to go through the objective process saying, do I like the rigidity or supposed rigidity of a pension plan? I think they should be asking, do I like the result of the pension plan?
Mm-hmm.
And then perhaps they look at a PPP. But it's been around in one form or another for years. It's now we're seeing it marketed as a standalone product. But I think it's got some merit to it. People have to look at the mechanics, see if that's consistent with what they can do in executing their own financial plan. But I think on the face of it, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. What is an RCA, and are they popular these days?
Retirement compensation arrangements were a forte of mine, and I guess I'm still, called on to opine on them from time to time.
That's why I'm asking you.
And there we go. Other than originally, they were brought in the environment of a 52% top marginal tax rate. And as I said, God forbid that we would get back to that. And maybe if we do, we'll be doing a lot of RCAs again. An RCA was a means by which we funded a supplemental pension. And we would have a structure where you could fund above and beyond the pension limit, but you had to park half of your contribution, which was fully deductible to the company, but you'd have to park half of it with the federal government, with Canada Revenue, for which you received no interest. So a lot of accountants hated it because you were giving half the money away. When they actually looked at what the tax cost was if you used the taxation on income, it was virtually non-existent. Where it fell out of favor was because people started to use their corporations or their holding companies to save. And I can't argue with that. The math was very clear that in that environment for the owner-operator, the corporation made more sense. Now, what I've seen as tax rates climb is that owner-operators are looking at them again. And where they can really make sense is almost as a hybrid vehicle where we're taking care of more than one planning issue. So, for instance, if we use permanent life insurance in an RCA, which was done very widespread about 10 years ago. I'm revisiting situations where we're now putting that in motion, and what we do is we enter what's called a split dollar contract, where we're going to take the pure insurance out of the RCA, put that into the company to fund a buy-sell provision in a shareholder agreement. The cash value of the policy, the investment fund, will stay in the RCA, grow, and become that supplemental pension when they retire. Very flexible vehicle. I like them. I was using a lot for executive severance. And of course, I was always trying to assist my beloved Montreal Canadiens in avoiding tax in Quebec. So I've done a few hockey cases as well, and I will continue to do that. And of course, the slam dunk for the RCA is if you have somebody who's here and does not intend to retire in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
when they sever those residential ties, usually they're withdrawing RCA monies pursuant to an international or bilateral tax treaty and paying between 15 and 25% total tax. So I think people are giving them a second look. I've certainly seen quite a lot of activity in that field. And I think they're very flexible and by that very nature provide what we want to the planning environment.
Mm-hmm. What do you find people overlook in their retirement planning?
They consider the rosy parts of retirement. They think about the first 5 years. So they think about the cruise. They think about going to visit relatives abroad, that they're going to be spending more time in their garden and all kinds of wonderful things. And I certainly hope they do. But we understand that healthcare, long-term care issues, elder care issues, largely don't make it on the radar screen. And they need, beyond what the government will provide through public health care, people need to set aside money for that. And I mean, you're going to need folks with your skill set to try to determine what those costs are going to be and then try to save for that. And I don't think they are. I don't think they're factoring that into retirement. I think that people tend to have a Pollyannish view of things. They have to consider, and we hope that it never happens, but they have to think about the downside of things, the worst case scenarios, and be ready for that. So certainly there are insurance products that will take care of a lot of that, but they're going to need money, largely in their corporation, if that's how they're saving, to pay for that. So simple retirement cost has to factor in things like healthcare. Then they may want to consider, estate planning. What are they leaving the kids? I'm finding charitable donations as a tax strategy, philanthropic gifting, to be a cornerstone strategy. People, they want to create a legacy, but they also don't want to pay 50% tax. So
Right.
It's a happy marriage of the two, and we're seeing quite a lot of activity there. But those are the things that have to make their way into the discussion about what does retirement look like. It's not just, I want to go and visit, Florida every year, and can you make sure that I've got the money for that? No, it's what happens if we have to put a ramp on your house or get you nursing care, or those issues, they're thorny, they're unsettling, but we've got to put them on the table for discussion.
Mm-hmm. What's your main message for the people watching?
Know thyself. Polonius said that, to thy own self be true. Know your limitations. You have to be able to, in an objective fashion, know your financial landscape. And I think a lot of people don't. So they have to build systems to do that. I used to tell people when I was a stockbroker that in order to maintain mental health in an insane marketplace or an insane profession, that the best thing to do is once a year write yourself a letter, and to focus on goals, whether they were real, whether you achieved them or got close. And because if you could lie to yourself, then you had larger issues. Shred the letter after. You never want, evidence, plausible deniability. But people have to create mechanisms to maintain objectivity. And when we are immersed in our business or in the tumult of family life or markets or other issues, politics, whatever it is, and we can't divorce ourselves from those things, we're not going to do proper planning. So it's objectivity first.
Thanks very much for dropping by.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Tea at Taxevity. The Taxevity Insurance Advisory helps you understand insurance and bridges gaps in your coverage. There's no premium for peace of mind. How healthy is your insurance?